This is
Essential.
This is Essential Audio.
Welcome to the MoneyPot, our podcast at Money 2020. I am Monique Ruff-Bell, the event director of Money 2020 USA, and I'm here with Sophie Vavro, the event director of Money 2020 Europe. Hi, Sophie.
Hi, Monique. Thanks for having me here. And we're also joined by Ian McGarrigle, the chairman of the World Retail Congress. And Ian, we're really looking forward to hearing all about the retail sector and what's happening in that space.
Thanks very much. Delighted to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
So the financial services industry touches every other industry, and it's important we're understanding what's happening there. So we want to keep our industry as plugged in as possible.
So just to give a little background to our discussion, we have been anticipating a recession for a while. I mean, none of us could have anticipated the events around COVID-19 and how drastic it is looking. We are all hoping for a V-shaped recovery, but that is looking more and more elusive. We know to expect a global recession in at least 170 countries, right?
Yeah, and we also know that as we're in lockdown, customer behaviours are shifting, and that's increased the pace of technological adoption. So we both looked at your report, Ian, the Retail World 2020, Retailing in a Time of Crisis. And one of the things that struck me is that it takes 66 days to form a new habit. So that's 9.5 weeks. And we're about to enter week 9 of lockdown. So it's pretty clear that the shifts in customer behaviour are going to be fairly permanent.
Yeah, I mean, I think, as you said, we're living through an extraordinary situation. No one has ever experienced this before. And I think we're already seeing changes in consumer behaviour. And the big question, of course, will be how many of them will be permanent. And that's the big thing that's absolutely occupying so many businesses. But from my point of view, talking to retailers, they can already see huge, almost seismic shifts in the way that consumers are behaving.
Yeah, I'm very much interested in seeing kind of what are the permanent behaviors that are going to kind of come out of this whole experience. I mean, even if they don't replace old habits completely, they will create some new ones, right? And I know I've been ordering a lot of new foods and going online for new experiences, and I know I'm definitely not alone in doing that. So I want to kind of start with the big picture. First, we're going to separate the food sector and other retail. And at the beginning of your report, you advise retailers to reshape, reimagine, and reposition. Reshape your channels, reimagine your offerings, reposition your business. So let's walk through each of these. So reshape your channels by building a winning e-commerce model and innovating your physical space. What are the components of a winning e-commerce platform?
Well, I think the interesting thing to say at the outset is that what's happened and the way that consumers are behaving, as you just said, Monique, we've all been buying a huge amount of stuff online simply because we have to. And I think that's one of the biggest changes that we've seen and retailers are experiencing. The biggest challenge that they're facing currently is how do you ramp up your investment to meet that huge increase in demand. So I think at the outset that's a key thing. But then it's also then having the investment in things like being able to read the orders and get the literally the picking and the logistics sorted out and the delivery side of e-commerce, because when we're all in lockdown, we all want something delivered. Well, even today, but certainly a day or two, no longer than that. So I think those for me are the kind of the critical areas around e-commerce, and it's as I say, it's really about scaling up to meet this massive increase in demand.
And when you say critical areas, do you think simplifying the online checkout process is a major part of this?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think the thing that's absolutely critical is having a seamless experience for us as shoppers shopping online, and let's not forget we're using many online retailers probably for the first time. We're searching for things we need, so we want to be able to sort of almost like a one-click process that Amazon have spoiled us with for so long now, to be able to sort of meet that search, find, buy, and pay in as seamless and as quick and efficient a process as possible. And that is absolutely critical point for retailers.
What innovations are you seeing in the physical space that are looking good? What will look good in the next 6 to 12 months, you think?
I think that's a really good question, because I think we're in uncharted waters. I mean, before what's now known as BC, which is before COVID, retail physical space was in an interesting place in the discussion. retailers were struggling with how could they reduce their store portfolio quickly enough and efficiently enough without incurring costs, and rethinking how physical space works, so that people were talking about having less stores, more flagships, creating great experiences in store. Well, I think we're now in a very different world, and I think on your timescale, Monique, of 6 to 9 months, my fear, but it's based on what retailers themselves believe, is that as more retail sectors reopen, there's now talk right around the world. We're seeing it in Asia of stores reopening, and in the Middle East, in Dubai and Saudi, the malls are reopening. And it's almost depressing to say, but the physical space is having to put in place those safety measures, because not only is it a legal guideline that's the only way that people are being allowed to open their stores, but I think we're in a new retail world that's going to find its level as we work through the situation, and hopefully avoid a second wave of the virus before I think we can start to see what retail looks like beyond that.
And I think you made a really good point, Ian, because for the simple fact that I know I was already not really going to the malls anymore, wasn't really going into brick and mortar stores anymore. Just from a time perspective, I can get everything that I need from, online. And now I'm really hesitant kind of about going to the stores now because of everything you've just talked about there. I don't want to try on the clothes that are there, and I don't want to be in overcrowded situations, and I don't want to touch everything everyone else touches. So I'm really interested in seeing kind of what those changes are, because I know, like you said, I'm not the only one, and there's probably a whole bunch of other people thinking in the same way.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think we're in a situation, right, where safety all of a sudden is kind of the new standard, where previously that would have been just a hygiene factor. But there are areas where we can be a bit more tailored, a bit more personalised. So we'd maybe talk about that a little bit. And I know the next point in your report is around reimagining your offerings and understanding those new behaviours and new occasions, targeting people through things like private labels and personalising marketing, that kind of thing. So can you talk a little bit about why private labels might be able to win in the new world?
I think it's. Private label's been an interesting area for some time, and there's a real sort of pressure, if you like, between, if you're a retailer selling lots of other brands, that's it's just a collection of brands. That's perfectly valid, but I think what we've seen over different cycles, but I think where we are particularly now is that what's your point of view? People are looking for things that are different. I think it touches on, what does a brand stand for? I think in this period, going back to this point about how our behaviours are changing, we're all looking for something we trust, we like, we can relate to. We've all been, looking out for hearing stories from friends and family about retailers that have been doing a great job. And all these things, I think, are all joined up in this big issue around what does a brand represent, what's its relevance. And I think those issues, those values, if you like, are never more important than they are right now. And I think as, I know we're going to come on to looking at the retail landscape, but we are seeing real casualties, and the number of them is going to escalate, I fear, and it's going to leave those that, as I say, really stand for something. And, private labels, or whether it's, you are a uni-brand business, it gives you the opportunity to, bring to life, whether it's a lifestyle or qualities and values that really can relate to what we as consumers are looking for.
Absolutely. And I think that was a trend we had seen even BC right before COVID, was that real trend towards treating consumers like individuals, personalisation, all of that kind of stuff. So if we look at that in the context of the contextualised marketing piece, so combining the digital with the physical, in the immediate future, what does personalised marketing look like? Is it significantly different in the world after coronavirus?
It was a huge issue going into the crisis. When you talk to retailers all over the world, you go to big technology shows, the big story from the technology players is around data, and really what that is driving ultimately is for a retailer, a brand, to understand their customers' even more. And the trick has been not just to sort of interrogate the historic sales data, because that went before. What data, the sophistication that is now being employed in terms of data and analytics and artificial intelligence is to kind of really get to know their customers at a micro level, and to second guess what they would like, what is right for them as lifestyles, etc. And I'd say that was a huge topic. But I think certainly at a previous World Retail Congress, we had Sir Tim Berners-Lee, who was the inventor of the World Wide Web. Even this was a few years ago, talking about privacy, and he was a great believer in obviously having the right guidelines around privacy. But he was also a great believer in if he would be prepared to share his personal data if in return he was getting something back from whichever business he was interacting with that talked to him and met his preferences and his needs. And I think that struck me, I think it was 5 years ago when he spoke at the Congress, and I think it's even more relevant today. It's a huge issue, and I think we want to feel like we have a relationship with the brands that we will buy from, and that they send, whether it's called marketing, but just communicating with us with great content. And we've seen an upsurge in live streaming and streaming content of video, and it's around, a lot of it is around brands who are telling stories that is marketing, but it's trying to do it in a subtle and interesting way that hopefully can relate on a much more personalised level to, hopefully it comes across as an individual, but it's obviously going to be smaller groups of the brand's customers.
Yeah, really interesting. And you mentioned data just there, and just making me think, I wonder if we've got a lot of companies out there sitting on mounds of data that are now becoming kind of obsolete, because with all this changing behaviour, maybe doesn't tell you very much about who your customer is today compared to your customer even 9-10 weeks ago.
No, I mean, that's right. Retailers have always sat on, sales data, so that they, in many senses, have always been awash with it. But it's that moving it to that new level of really being able to interpret it, as I say, beyond that was yesterday's sales that you're recording, to take it forward to really understand what tomorrow might bring, and what people have been buying, and analysing it in a sophisticated way we've never seen before. So that truly is the prize.
And if you're talking about kind of reimagining your offerings, do you think we're going to see lots of simplification of offerings? Is it going to become a less is more world?
Yeah, I think that's interesting. I mean, it's already in putting the reports together. I'm, talking even more regularly with retailers around the world, and I guess that process began at the beginning of the lockdowns. And I know we're going to touch on the food sector, but I think they experienced panic buying, as we all saw. They had to replenish, and what they've learned very, very quickly, and I think it's going to sort of have a knock-on effect with other product sectors, is that to refill those shelves, you narrow the range. I think we've all felt suddenly in our new lives that we're leading that that massive choice isn't the first thing we're looking for. It's understanding what the essentials are that we need and want, and it is a big issue that retailers are talking about. Again, it touched on something that we were going into this crisis with, when people, a big issue, of course, was sustainability, and in a sense, it's sort of quietened down because of this is a global pandemic, so everything gets focused around those issues. But I think it's people are thinking, what do I really need here, and it's forcing all of us, I think, to make some quite distinct choices, and retailers are already picking up on that, and almost as though going to be a move against. Dare I say it, that sort of unbridled consumerism where people just wanted to buy stuff. And I even hear retailers saying, maybe we've all got too much stuff, and we're going to be more selective coming out of this. And that is, retailers are great at bouncing back and readjusting to a new landscape. And I think they're already thinking, okay, if it's going to be less stuff, narrower ranges, we've got to make sure we have the very best, the most innovative, most creative, eye-catching product, whatever sector it is that's going to catch our attention.
Can I just say, Ian, off of your point about the food, I have never been so adventurous with the food that I've been trying because what's limited on the shelves than I have been now. And I've come to realize that I need to expand my palate because some of the things that I am trying, I do not like. But you made some really good points there in regards to, you don't have to have a million things on the shelf. Maybe you can answer this question. Will we ever see disinfectant spray and wipes ever again in life? Because they're still not on the shelves. Can you talk to your retailer buddies about that one, please?
Yeah, I think we've seen a real shift on that, where people sit on that scale between need and want. I think it's been interesting to see, and kind of people recalibrating that feeling of what necessity really feels like, I suppose. Yeah, and you touched on the food sector there, Ian. So just to go back to that briefly. So grocery stores, I think, have been incredibly busy, or at times totally empty, I feel like, but swaying between the two. Your report says that increased spending is only kind of offsetting the health and safety measures that most stores have had to implement, which have, of course, been very, very expensive for them. And their supply chains have changed completely. So now that they're restocking, you're recommending that kind of flexible operational approach. Can you tell us a little bit more about what that flexible operating approach means?
Yeah, well, as you say, I mean, they were hit because they were obviously deemed quite rightly an essential retail sector. They are literally feeding us. So that's first phase, which started with low-level sort of panic buying of certain product lines. And then I well remember walking into my local supermarket, not expecting to, see the, toilet rolls and rice and pasta. I didn't expect to see that, but I walked in and literally it was empty. The chief exec of Tesco in the UK last week was saying, what they experienced was like, five of their busiest pre-Christmas days, sort of all coming in the same week, and you can never model and plan for that. It just literally just cleaned them out and all their the stock in their warehouses. So I think the first thing in terms of flexibility was meeting and recalibrating their whole logistics and supply chain to get what was needed into the store, and working out the best way of doing that, and working with their suppliers, which they've been hugely successful with in many cases. One area, a huge pressure for them, was that so many of their members of staff went into self-isolation with the illness. And again, go back to Tesco, they had to, they lost, I think at one point, something like 50,000 people across the business who were self-isolating. So they had to recruit a similar number, and they put the call out. But also all food retailers, and we've seen that right around the world, done a massive job of recruiting, training people to work in store, to replenish, to act as delivery drivers in the online services that retailers have. So I think certainly the way I see it, they've shown the very best of retail, and how dynamic an industry it is for them to move and pivot as fast as they have done, let alone, and then employing this sort of safety measures they've needed in store to then be able to safely bring, allow customers to come into the store and shop. And it's a very alien way for us all to shop, but even more so for retailers to have to do that. It's been pointed out that it's taken decades for supermarkets to develop the way that a store is merchandised, and they've employed very clever techniques for using eye levels and shelf displays, and how do you display price promotions. Well, all that has been ripped up, and all the rule book is gone, because we all have to go through a store in a particular traffic direction, 2 meters apart from each other, etc. And it makes it really hard for the whole shopping process as it was, in terms of but they will, and already starting to learn how to re-merchandise and bring about a new way of modelling the store that satisfies the shopping process.
There must be so many stressed out merchandisers in the world right now.
Yes.
As those mounds of data, like we were talking about before, mounds of data becoming all of a sudden kind of obsolete overnight must be very, very scary for people who are very well trained to do that. Very tough job.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, and Ian, just to kind of jump a little bit off regarding the shopper experience. So many of the grocers are now offering online shopping, but consumers are finding the service a bit underwhelming. I mean, I have never ever done my food shopping online, and I literally tried it for the first time with Instacart, and I gave up. I couldn't get a date. I couldn't get, and I know it's easy to kind of figure it out, but I couldn't get it together, and I'll just forget it. I'll just go down the 4 blocks down the street and just go in there. So I get it that, the service is kind of seeming underwhelming and the experience is kind of overwhelming at the same time. So, what are the shifts that they will need to make to kind of win in this space, the grocers? Who in the space will be in good shape? How do they keep the supply chains in good shape? How do you enhance the experience for it to be better? What are some of your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, it's a good point, and I think the key thing is we shouldn't forget kind of the immediacy with what happened. Lockdowns around the world were just like one day we were living what we thought was a normal life, kind of coping with this virus that was seemingly getting worse, and then we were all told we had to stay indoors, either literally under curfew or sort of slightly more flexible as we have here in the UK. But we knew, it was going to be hard to get to the stores, and what the online services of either pure play or omnichannel retailers had to face was just an exponential increase. So you're absolutely right. I mean, certainly in the UK, the Ocados, which is a pure play, but Tesco and Sainsbury's and others around the world, trying to find a delivery slot, you could have paid good money swapping it with a friend or a family member to get that delivery slot. So it doesn't help the experience, and you're right, that's been a big limiting factor. But again, going back to the point I made to Sophie, it's been quite incredible how they've ramped up delivery slots. I mean, Tesco in a matter of weeks has trebled the weekly available delivery slots, which is, that will help. Whether that higher number will be needed as we come out of this, that's going back to one of the original questions around how we've changed our behaviour. But I think, Monique, you're absolutely right. I think what we've also seen is that people have returned to shopping in store for their food. It's completely changed behaviour to go back, ironically, that people are doing one big weekly shop because they want to go, if they're going to go and feel safe, let's not go every day, let's go once a week and do that. So, the food retailers who've got on and offline have obviously seen a massive increase in online, but they're also saying the amount of visits to their store have gone up, but we're also spending a huge amount more because we can't eat out in restaurants, unfortunately. But so we're spending a huge amount more on food anyway, but we're doing it in a different way. We're not using them as convenience stores like we did just a few weeks ago.
I know I've definitely blown out my food budget for the week every week. It's literally double. My online shopping for consumer goods is down and my food budget is a ridiculous amount right now. But just to even kind of get into a little bit more of the brick and mortar side of this conversation, brick and mortar retail reports were looking grim before this. And I mean, this has pushed some over the edge. JCPenney, Neiman Marcus, they've all kind of started to go towards that bankruptcy route, I think. Is this a nail in the coffin of the department store did COVID speed that up? What do you think?
Yeah, well, it's interesting that looks, I mean, it was before COVID, so many questions being asked about the department store. And sometimes I take a step back because before launching the World Retail Congress, I was a retail journalist and editor, and I well remember over my career over quite a few years now, I think I probably did write a headline 20 years ago, is this the death of the department store? So on one hand, it's gone round in waves, and then they miraculously come back. But I do think we're in a different era. That's even before COVID. Some of the retailers you mentioned, and there are many others around the world, certainly in the UK. Debenhams and House of Fraser before the crisis were looking really sickly and had gone through financial restructuring anyway. So it's a difficult question, because I always feel there's so many jobs wrapped up in the department store sector alone that you really feel for what will happen to people working in that sector. All those brands that are stocked there. We've seen the knock-on effect in the last 2 or 3 years with brands that have suffered because they've been stocked by department stores that are cutting back or no longer with us. So I think there's no easy answer. I do think there will be less department store groups that emerge out of this crisis. But equally, you mentioned some specialty retailers in there too, and I fear that what we're experiencing is so extreme. There's no hiding place, unfortunately, for those retailers that are highly leveraged, have gone through really checkered recent sort of histories, financial histories primarily, that are unfortunately already sort of tumbling before our eyes, and there will be more casualties. If we can kind of find a positive to that, and it does feel like sometimes after a storm, it's things are swept away, but new life, new growth will come from that. And it's one of the big issues for retail that has been spoken about for so long is that it's overstored. There's too much retail space, too much physical retail space, and everyone in the industry knows that, and they've been taking incremental steps to close stores where they can. But before COVID, that's a really hard, tough thing to do. There's lots of financial costs, there's lots of human costs to that, and so it's been hard for retailers to sort of take really bold, sweeping sort of cuts to their store portfolio, even though they probably know that's what they need to do. But we're now in extreme situations where it's life or death in terms of a business. So we're seeing lots more announcements of big store closures from specialty businesses through to department stores that you've mentioned. So I think if I try and think of the positives, and I do believe that the retail, where there'll be less players, that will give breathing room and sort of more areas for growth from those that are left, and also startups to come in.
Yeah. Do you think any type of loyalty scheme, should retailers be looking for loyalty schemes to drive more people back into the department store? Do you think that is going to help at all, or do you think this is just the wave that we have to deal with?
I think the issue with any loyalty scheme from a retailer, it's about going back to that point about data. It's about building that relationship with your customer. So what is it you want them to be loyal? Why should they be loyal to you? What is it you're offering? And I think there's no getting away from the fact that if you're focusing on department stores specifically, but any retailer, but a department store has to offer something that makes you feel good about that brand. I mean, I think if you take a retailer like a department store retailer like Selfridges in the UK, it's there is the International Association of Department Stores, which is, as its name suggests, it's the one of the biggest groups for department stores around the world, and consistently they vote. So their department store operators, they vote Selfridges as the best department store in the world. And you can pick up on a few others, but what makes them different is they've achieved that important thing of the name over the door, Selfridges, or you can name others like Harrods, but they stand for something. It's something you recognise from the yellow bags of Selfridges. It's the kudos of going there. It creates another earlier question that you raised about creating experiences and personalisation. It's more than just a collection of other people's brands. They've created an ambience and an environment that you as a customer want to go there, and I think it's a loyalty scheme from a retailer like that means something, and it's about, and that is going to become even more important, is what you stand for, what your brand is, and do we feel as a consumer, do we feel excited about that brand? Do we like it? Do we think it talks to us as an individual? And does it feel good to have a loyalty membership card from at one level from that retailer? So I think that's an important consideration for whether it's a department store retailer or any retailer. I think winning and loyalty of a group of customers is going to be even more important, and I think it drills down to that point about having that powerful relationship between the retailer and the chosen customer.
I love that idea of kind of loyalty scheme as private member club or something like that. Sounds lovely. So just very quickly, because we're running short on time, but could you just touch on how the COVID situation will affect sustainability discussions?
Yeah, it's really interesting. Again, going into the crisis, we at the Congress, we should have been running this year's Congress at the end of April. It's now going to be end of October. One of the big themes that we were focusing around was sustainability, because it was the defining issue, and you would like to think it is still, and I believe it is in many ways, but it's strangely disheartening to hear from many retail industry experts that I've been talking to that in this crisis suddenly packaging is all important, because we want things wrapped, double wrapped, treble wrapped to make us feel safe. So single-use plastics is on the increase again, because that's what online purchases need, because we want to feel safe when it arrives and feel that it's it's not being touched by human hands. So suddenly that area which we've all been focused around has been put to one side. But I think so. It's a strange one, but I think it's made us all at this time think about what sustainability is. I think there's been so many pictures from cities around the world where they can see blue sky. The air is cleaner than before, where there's hardly any cars on the streets, and wild animals are roaming our cities. And I think that's something that people have been noticing and talking about. So so yes, there's that sort of depressing sort of short-term expediency where things like plastics and single-use plastics has been apparently on the increase, but equally, sustainability in terms of how we live our lives in cities, and people are talking about we don't need to work in offices quite as much as we did. Therefore, let's divide our time more than we did. So will that in turn help our cities by decreasing the traffic? Do we need to get on airplanes as much as we did? So I think those big issues around sustainability, people are talking about them, and perhaps not necessarily putting together the context of what we were talking about before COVID. But I really do think that will emerge out of the crisis when people start to feel let's learn the lessons of what we've been through here, and I do think sustainability will be a big part of it, because it's made us all look and step back and think about our lives and and our lifestyles and the environment that's kind of re-emerged in which we now live.
Absolutely. And yeah, maybe we're seeing a bit more of a sense now that people are moving back into being able to think about sustainability. Being able to think about anything other than COVID, I suppose, is just a little ray of hope at the end of it. So a lot of what we've talked about today is about leading with value and values, that consumers are looking for brands that provide them with considerable value or share their values. And post-COVID, it sounds like that's going to be an even bigger part of the puzzle. So that ends this special episode of the MoneyPot, and we're very grateful that Ian McGarrigle of World Retail Congress was able to join us.
Yes, thank you, Ian. This was a really great conversation. Glad we had the opportunity to kind of talk through that report. We think that this will be really useful to our industry. Also, we want to announce that we will be taking our Rise Up program digital for a 365-day-a-year engagement. We are starting with the Rise Up Live on June 16th through the 18th, and this will include keynotes, workshops, and chances to meet and greet. It's our first digital offering that we're going to be doing starting in June, and we are bringing the real Rise Up to a virtual space.
Very exciting. Also, a reminder that the portal is open for speaker submissions for Money 2020 USA in October. And we're very much looking forward to seeing you at Money 2020 Europe in Amsterdam on September the 22nd to the 24th.
Yeah, so thank you all for listening, and please reach out to us on social media or our website to tell us ideas you have for the show. Thank you again to Sophie and Ian.
This is
Essential.
This is Essential Audio.